All right, so those are more detailed of the laws here. So now I want to talk about how we can use this principle and what we know about it to our advantage. All right, so feel free to jump in with any comments on this as well. But so the first, I think I've got 6 or 7 of these, but the first one is these are basically practical things that we can do to combat Parkinson's law in our work. So continually reduce the time allotted to your tasks. Aim to challenge yourself to grow. Okay, first in your personal tasks, and second in tasks you delegate. And then develop an internal sense of urgency that leads to an external culture of urgency. So what this means is time yourself. You know, when I train people how to do prep or work in the store, I talk about this all the time. For those of you that I trained, you know, you've heard me talk about, you know, the 5-second rule, how we limit our expectations and we set a standard that's better than what we would do naturally, right? And the 5-second rule is one of those things. Or you guys have watched me do prep, and I don't typically just take my time and use up all of this the time that's available to me. And some of you have heard me talk about how if we're going to make a pizza in the middle of the afternoon and there's nobody there in the lobby and you still have 20 minutes to get it done, make it fast, because when you practice making pizzas fast, you get good at making fast pizzas. When you practice making pizzas slow, you get good at making slow pizzas. Make every pizza fast and efficient. And so you guys have heard me talk about a lot of that if you've worked with me in the kitchen, and many of you are really good at this too, probably better than me in a lot of cases. So part of it is measure yourself, time yourself, and then work to reduce that allotted time for your tasks. I remember timing myself on chopping dough and then trying to get a little bit better, 10 or 15 seconds faster each batch of dough I would chop, you know, and I would time myself on how long it takes to sheet, you know, a tote of large dough balls. And then I would keep working on that. So that's one way you can do that, is keep reducing the allotted time, and it keeps pushing you and it's challenging you. So the opposite of this would just be start working at your normal pace and see how long it takes. And however long it takes is however long it takes. Whatever you don't get done, you don't get done. See the difference?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Anybody experienced that before? Anybody had to make the transition from working at a natural speed to working at a intentional speed?
Definitely me. Definitely me. When I first started to learn how to do things faster than before, and then one day it just felt like it clicked, and that switch went on, and then it became fun. Every time I would do it, like, for example, lately it's been with cheese. So I'm probably one of the select few that loves shredding cheese. I love it. It feels like a workout and it's a challenge, and I love it. So I knew that the average was 10 minutes, and 8 minutes was excellence. And so I got to 9 minutes eventually. And then I'm like, I gotta push this, only one more minute. And I finally got there. It was a lot of fun, and it was really rewarding, just personally rewarding.
So number 2, fully commit to your desired outcome or your purpose. Determined to rise to the challenge, whatever it takes. Being fully committed is really, really important, and it gets you through tougher times. You know, adrenaline kicks in and it kicks you into the next gear. You know, use your advantage and learn to master, you know, your adrenaline. Learn to use that. You know, I love that atmosphere when I have to roll up my sleeves and kick it into another gear and just get after it. It's stimulating to me. It's for whatever reason, I love to do that. It's a challenge, and we can't do that if we're not fully committed. And so what I mean by fully committed, that can apply to a lot of things. Being fully committed could mean being fully committed to getting everything done by 3 p.m. so that you'll be locked and loaded for that night. Being fully committed could be fully committed to staffing your store and doing whatever it takes to get your store staffed. Being fully committed could be to getting my store so that it's profitable to a certain degree within a 4-month period. And I'm going to do anything I can to get it going. I'm going to work on this and work on that and focus on the numbers. Or it could be fully committed to learn a number of things, or fully committed to become the best you can possibly be by daily working on yourself and making yourself better. All of those happen only when you're committed. If you're half committed, you'll never accomplish it. In fact, it's interesting. It really is a universal law that if you're not fully committed, you're always going to fall short of expectation. It's just the way it is. Why would your results are never going to be higher than your commitment. So if you're half committed, you're never really going to be, you're not going to get the results of somebody that's fully committed. If that makes sense. So, all right. Number 3, always work goal-oriented, not time-oriented. This can be a challenge for people who are being promoted from an hourly position to a salaried position, because you're time-oriented. You're kind of used to thinking, okay, I'm coming in at 10 o'clock and I'm leaving at 6 o'clock, or I'm leaving at 7 o'clock. And so I'm working this 9-hour shift, and that's what I do. I'm putting in my time. But when you're a general manager, you don't get paid by time, you get paid by results. So you have to change your thinking from being time-oriented to more results-oriented. Make sense? Or goal-oriented. You want to achieve things. And if you can spend less time and hit your goals and achieve it, then great. And then you spend a little bit less time doing it. But if it takes a little bit more, then you take a little bit more. That's part of what the commitment is. And when you're not time-oriented, that doesn't bother you so much. And I know many of you are terrific at this. You think this way. You just think in terms of, well, hey, it's my responsibility. We got to get it done. And because you're efficient, you get things done. You're normally getting things done early. You're doing it efficiently enough that you've got a margin at the end of the evening. And so you're not always pushed to work later than you're supposed to, because you've got these things in place, and because you've put these goals in place to complete rather than just to work out your time. Always assign a time for completion, a finish line, benchmarks, and that ensures timeless and efficiency. In our red book, this is the reason why we put a time in our red book for our finish line. And then we have also the benchmarks, where we put a time in our benchmark. That's why we put those in there. So we have little mini goals to work towards that set up to finish a certain amount of things within a couple of hours. And then you move on to your next benchmark and your next one. Think of them as like mile markers along the road, so you know where you're at. Your benchmarks will tell you how you're doing. If you're on target and you're hitting your benchmarks, then you're on the right trajectory to finish what you're supposed to finish by the time you're supposed to finish it. Your 3 o'clock is on target if you know that you're hitting your benchmarks. Your finish lines and benchmarks should always be challenging, but it's attainable. Like, you shouldn't be setting your finish lines to be easy. That's what Parkinson's law says. If you can do something in 4 hours, don't give yourself 6 hours to do it just because that's what you can give yourself. Give yourself 4 hours to do it and push yourself, and then figure out something to do with those extra 2 hours that's productive, that you can get done above and beyond what you normally would have. That's how people get ahead. That's how the effective and efficient leaders in the restaurant world get ahead of things. That's how they clear space to be able to do some of the extracurricular things, like look at their numbers and hone in on things and plan out their next week and research and look into things. That's how they get that extra margin of space, by finishing earlier than they have to. So be afraid of under communicating. Okay, so be afraid of under communicating, because really bad things can happen when you under communicate. Your job isn't to tell them the expectations, it's to gain certainty that is fully understood. So get confirmation. Y'all understand what this means? How many times have you heard somebody say, well, I told them? Yeah, but did they hear you? Did they understand what you meant? Did you get confirmation that they told you? Because, if you go back to the other person, they can say, no, you didn't tell me. I didn't know anything about it. But sometimes you can remove all doubt by getting that head nod, looking at them in the eyes and saying, hey, just so you know, here's what I want you to do. And it's written in the red book. Can you take care of this before you go home tonight? And you get the head nod and they say, yes, I will do that. Well, there's no mistake then. You're not just telling them. You've actually gained certainty that they fully understood. And that's the difference. See, a leader's obligation is not to tell people things. A leader's obligation is to make sure that people understand things. There's a big difference. Have you guys seen that play out where maybe we take a shortcut and we only do the minimal and tell people, and then it ends up biting you? Never assume. Previously communicated expectations fade quickly. Like a battery, it needs to be recharged daily with repetition. So make sure you're communicating the important things every single day, even if you sound like a parrot. You guys have heard me say some certain terms for many, many years, over and over and over. Sometimes maybe you might feel sick hearing me talk about this stuff all the time, but it's in your brain and it's stuck and you can't get it out. for those of you that have worked with me for 10 or more years, you all know what those are. You guys can regurgitate this stuff in your sleep. And so we want this to carry on throughout the whole company, so that they know exactly what you're going to talk to them about when they come in at 4:00, because they heard it the day before and the day before and the day before. You're going to get these reminders over and over and over. You want them to really fall into a rut where this is very repetitious. So be afraid of under communicating and the dangers that can happen. Because when you leave it up to other people to interpret and do things the way they believe it should be done, that's a really bad recipe for disaster. And this one combats the law of procrastination. So get it done now. Don't let the sun go down. It's really easy sometimes when we have an important problem that we need to deal with to let it fester and then push it off till tomorrow, and then push it off till tomorrow, and then the next day and the next day. And we do this sometimes because we just think it's going to go away if we don't deal with it. Maybe it'll just fix itself. Maybe they'll just kind of it'll patch itself up and it won't be a problem anymore. Well, that hardly ever happens, right? It's better to deal with it right away so it doesn't become worse down the road. So if it's a top priority, schedule it, protect it, and do it. So if it's a meeting that you need to have with somebody, or you need to talk with them about their performance, or help get them on track, schedule it, protect that time. Don't let anything get in the way, and then do it. Do it. Don't let it fester on. Don't be afraid to confront just because you're afraid that what somebody's going to think of you, or whatever it is. You gotta deal with it. You got to rip the Band-Aid off, and you got to deal with it. Get it done. So procrastination will just make things worse. If it's not a top priority, delegate it, delay it, or remove it. So if it's not something worthy of your time, maybe you can delegate it. Have your assistant manager deal with it. Have your shift leader deal with it, or remove it. If it's not really that important, don't worry about it. Get it off your plate, so it's not going to take up your time. Stay ahead of your solutions, not falling behind, multiplying your problems. So you got to stay ahead of it. If there's a problem, deal with it. Then there's no problems. If you just let your problems pile up one after another, after another, after another, you fall too far behind, and there's no way to get caught back up. Think of a person that keeps charging a bunch of money on a credit card. At first you think, okay, it's not a big deal, I can pay that back. But then down the road, if you just keep that habit going over and over and over, then before you know it, you've got so much money charged on your credit card, you're so in over your head, there's no way that you're going to be able to do this. So your tendency then is to bail. I've seen people let problems pile up so much in their store that their only option is to quit and move on to a place where they don't have problems, and they can start fresh. Okay. Don't let that happen. Stay ahead of your problems by getting it done and not procrastinating. All right. Number 6, whatever you want to have, give even more. So be your best. This is the margin effect. If somebody asks you to do 5 units of something, do 6 units of something. Invest in others and they will invest in you. Raise your value to others. Do more than what's expected, that type of a thing. And your reward will be even greater. Sacrifice always comes before reward. Don't reap before you sow. Okay. Sometimes we want to reap before we sow. We want to get paid before we actually do the work. And then we get paid and then we don't do the work, right? Ever seen that? Contractors that make you pay up front. You pay them and then they don't come back. Those are people that want to reap it before they sow. But we need to have the perspective that we always need to sow before we reap. Prove yourself, go above and beyond, and then you'll reap something, and you'll be worth more. And the next time you'll reap more. So you're always raising your value. So whatever you have to do. So don't do as little as you have to because you have more time to do it. Get it done as quickly as you can, and maybe even a little quicker the next time. And regardless of what has been expected of you as far as time, you're doing the best you can, and you're improving yourself, and your value will skyrocket. If we're always doing as little as we have to, our value will never skyrocket. It'll just stay the same or go down. So